everybody. Welcome to the Bruce Starr Show. We're going to have lots and lots of surprises for you today, because anytime I have someone from the entertainment industry on the show as a guest, especially someone I've known, since the middle 80s, things are always going to be exciting. And this is going to be no different. Today, we're going to have a stand-up comedian, a comic actor, and not everyone was around during the original Star Search. But for those that were around for the original Star Search, though that was the first show that gave birth to all these other shows, all these entertainment shows, American Idol, and it goes on and on, America's Got Talent. It all started with Star Search in the 80s. And the very first winner of the comedian, the very first comic winner, was my guest, Steve Mittleman. Welcome to the show, Steve. It's great to have you, my friend.
Hi, Bruce. How are you?
I'm doing just great. You know, it's amazing. You know, we weren't best friends, but, you know, we had a lot of respect for each other. We saw each other at the Improv all the time.
All the time.
I always had a lot of respect for you. You being a stand-up comedian and being up there with the best of them, Robin, Paul Reiser, Larry David, you know, you name it. You were on the same boards, on the same showcases as they were.
Big time. Yeah, I knew everybody, and they were very sweet to me. So
that's good. Well, I would love people to hear about you. Can you tell us a little bit about you, where you were born, and how the heck you decided to get into the world of comedy?
I got into comedy through a medical research focus group on depression. Actually, I think comedy saved my life. I would have been suicidal without my sense of humor, for sure. And I don't take it lightly because of what's happened recently in the news and terrible losses. So I was born in Montreal when I was about a year old or so. My parents moved to Queens, New York, so I was raised in Queens. But I have no accent because I have a kind of a clash between the Canadian accent and the New York accent. I broke even and broke neutral. So, but I grew up in Queens, middle class Jewish family. Went to Hebrew school, a very strict Hebrew school. We had nuns. So anyway, there you go. But it's true. I grew up. I met a lot of interesting people. Give you an idea of my family. For a while we lived in till the end of third grade. For me, at least my third grade, we grew up near Creedmoor, right across the street from Creedmoor, which was a mental institution, and tells you how crazy we were. We used to sneak in there, and people would escape there all the time. And when I was, like 5, 6 years old, we'd see the men in white wagons looking for escaped patients. And my older brother and sister, they go, oh, they're going to come after you. They're going to come after you. They're going to take you there. And I used to hide under the bed. So that was my childhood. But I'm very lucky because I got along very well with my brother and my sister, not so well with my parents. My parents, they were very much the Costanzas, only not as funny. They were a screaming New York Jewish couple, pretty much. That was them. But my dad was very funny. In the middle of yelling, he'd say something funny, and I'd crack up because I could tell what was funny. And then he'd scream louder because it's like, what are you laughing at? He didn't see it himself. And my mom not to bring anybody down, but he would scream to the point where I'd break down crying for many years. And my mom was the enforcer. She was the one that physically she'd carry out the punishments.
Wow.
So I'd never bonded with my family at least my parents, which is awful. And for a boy, I never bonded with my mom. So that I needed, cliche, but I needed the hug from the audience. By the time I was 20, 21, I got into comedy in the summer of 76. And then I went back to school. And I went to 3 different schools, Baruch in the city, then I transferred to Brockport. I'll tell you how bad my childhood was. Being a Jewish New York kid, this was right after the end of Vietnam. I enlisted right after Vietnam. I wouldn't enlist during Vietnam, but because I didn't have great grades, I wasn't a great student. But what I did is I said, I got to get out of here. I won't be able to transfer anywhere. And I loved radio, and that's where I wanted to go. Like Good Morning Vietnam, but I guess I didn't know about that movie yet, but it was, I knew they had a radio school somehow in the Army, and I joined. And it was the summer of maybe 74, I think it was. And I signed up. I did the physical. I was all ready to go to the Army. And they said, well, it's going to be like a 6-month wait to go into the Army. And I went down to Florida. I loved golfing. And I was in Fort Myers with a friend of mine, moved down to Florida, and another friend. The 3 of us went on a little golfing vacation for like a week. And sure enough, my mom, I'm talking to her on the phone, and she says, you got your registration card from Baruch. And she said, why not go back to school? And I thought, why don't I go back to school while I'm waiting to go into the Army? And I got my grades up and I transferred out. So after that fall winter term, I got my grades up. I applied to University of SUNY Brockport. It wasn't SUNY, it was SUC back then, for major in radio and communications. And I transferred up there, and I didn't have to go in the Army. Army was very cool because it was not a wartime climate. And I was very, very fortunate. They didn't hold me to it, even though it was everything signed and sealed and delivered. But I wasn't delivered, except I went there, and I love radio, and that was my second love always. I don't know what my first love was, but I love comedy. As I was growing up, I watched a million comedians on TV. I always loved it. I met a lot of the people that I used to watch on TV, but I used to watch like the Mike Douglas show in New York, and Merv, and of course Carson. And my whole childhood, there was just a little angle just from where my bedroom was, and you could see like this much of Carson. And I used to, even in my young years, I used to see Carson like through this little window of space. The TV was centered right there, and I used to watch Carson. My parents never knew it, and I loved watching him, and I loved the monologue. And so that's, we watched Ed Sullivan on Sundays, and so I love the comedians. And my sister she worked in special services at ICM. Before that, it was something called CMA, and they were a major agency. So I loved Robert Klein and Carlin, but I saw Klein tape his second album. So live in a recording studio. Wow. And, so I got a little, and he was my favorite. I think I got to meet him afterwards, and went with a friend of mine. And so I was very fortunate. I had that, connection to stand up, and I loved it. I used to go to see him live, and I used to sneak, and I'm tall, I'm 6'4". I got my height from my parents. Mom's 3'2", dad's 3'2". So I would sneak in to the Improv. I was underage, but I would sneak in there and watch shows with my a friend or two, and we go and take the subway from Queens, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, I went, I got to observe at least. I got a taste of what I might want to do. It was like my fallback plan if I didn't stick with the radio.
So who were you watching on stage at the time when you were sneaking in?
Bob Shaw, Glenn Super, may he rest in peace, who passed. And I think I saw Elaine Boozler, who's a friend of mine now, and
well, let me put it this way: how did you get
Ed Bluestone? Right. Yeah.
Doing that first time, getting up on stage for that first time? Let me hear about that. How did that go?
It was a speech class. I had final project was potluck in my oral interpretation class, and so I said, something, I've got this list of ideas for jokes and stories, and I don't know how long I did, but I was up all night. I ran it by my dorm mates, and I killed. I did great. My first time ever on stage. Well, because I already had like they opened their hearts to me because I knew them the whole term and they liked me, so it was a plus for me to go and do stand-up for the first time. It was like, that maybe makes sense for him. And there's not much to talk about. It wasn't much to talk about. When you're, 19, 20 years old, you don't have much life experience to talk about, but, you're influenced by comedians. Like I loved Robert Klein. I love Rodney. I love Woody Allen. I know that's kind of a curse word right now for a lot of people, but back then, it was more innocent about him. And I got to work with him, which was really great. I was in Radio Days. I did like 9 days of taping. In Radio Days, I'm cut to like nothing, but back then it was an amazing experience. Like, oh my God, working with Woody Allen. And I worked with a lot of people. I worked with Steve Martin, worked with Bruce Starr. There you go. I
was your personal appearance agent for a while.
You were?
Yes.
I didn't realize. I'm sorry, I don't remember anything except something.
So how do you go from telling jokes in class to getting on stage, and then, my God, what a star search! Tell us about that whole.
Well, I'll tell you what. I went in the summer of '76. I was transferring to the University of Buffalo. And this is a great story. What are you doing there? That you're doing karate or something?
No, not me. No.
Okay, I'm with you. So summer of '76, I was transferring from once again from University of State University College at Brockport to University of Buffalo, mainly because my friends were going there. And I didn't know what I was going to take there. I took communications, and believe it or not, Tolstoy. It was such a liberal school, remarkably liberal school, and you're going to hear how liberal it was in a second. So I didn't know what I wanted to do at Brockport anymore. I was like, well, enough with the radio. I don't want to do it. And I transferred in the fall of '76 to University of Buffalo. But Brockport and Buffalo are like an hour apart anyway, so it was not a big move for me. And I was going to be living off campus with two close friends that I grew up with. And but I knew I loved stand-up. Now I'm back to my backup plan. No more radio, even though I still love radio. I even love doing this right now. I really do. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Sure. So what happened was summer '76, I said, I'm going to audition at the Improv in New York on 44th and 9th. There's a dive area is really bad. You know, that was the worst of Times Square, and Times Square was like a block away, a long block between 9th Avenue and 8th Avenue, but a really bad area. But I would go every Sunday and audition. I think maybe the first time I ever auditioned on a Sunday night, Diana Ross was in the audience. I'm pretty sure, yeah, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
The pressure was just insane. And then Judy Orbach, who was the person that you would pick numbers, index cards with numbers on them, and you'd audition in that order, whatever number you pick. But she liked me, and so I'd pick, like number 29, and then she'd go, drop it back in there, pick another one, so I'd pick number 4, you know what I mean? So I'd have good spots, and she saw some promise or just liked me as a person or whatever. But, I usually get a good spot, and, then I started hanging out during the week, even though I didn't go on. I got to see as much live comedy as I could possibly see. And it's addictive. It's absolutely an addiction. It's an addiction, stand-up. You're learning and you're growing and you're writing and it's a never-ending process. I'm still going through the process right now. I'm still learning 42 years later. So simply, I auditioned, 10, 15 times during the summer of 76, and then I have to leave the process and go back to school. And I was taking all these pretty hip courses in this mostly very liberal school, State University of New York at Buffalo. And the Tolstoy courses in particular are remarkably as liberal as you could get. And during all the radical time of the late 60s and early 70s, they had women's studies and African American studies and independent studies. And my dad, in the spring of 75, spring of 76, had a stroke. So I was 20 years old, and I was back for Passover. My dad had a stroke. And my folks, I was paying for my own schooling. And my folks, since he had a stroke, being his dependent, everything converged to what I'm about to tell you. The government, our beautiful government, as long as I had 12 credits and I was my dad's dependent, even though he wasn't paying for my schooling, it was as if he was, because I'm his dependent. As long as I had 12 credits, I was going to get like $150 a month supplemented schooling from our government, from Social Security, I think it was. And sure enough, University of Buffalo, the very hip liberal University of Buffalo, allowed me to take a 12-credit independent study called stand-up comedy.
Wow.
And I was able to go in the spring of 77 to New York, and I had to write and send it in. I had a professor who was overseeing my independent class called stand-up comedy, and I was getting unheard of $150, which was not bad. You could survive on that in New York. My sister had an apartment on 89th between 1st and 2nd. The comic strip was on 82nd and 2nd. The Catch a Rising Star was on 77th on First Avenue and between 77th and 78th. So I had my home clubs there. The Improv was on 44th and 9th. The Comedy Cellar was in the Village. I forget what the exact street is, but I've been there a million times. And
were you able to get on at each of those places?
That slowly but surely, I worked my way up, and I was very nervous. I had a lot of tics. but once in a while I'd have a very good set. But I was known more as a good writer. And my friend Billy Reback, if you remember him,
Oh
he's
my
still
God,
very,
I love Billy.
very,
Well,
very
tough to
close
love
friend.
Billy, but I knew him very well.
Yeah, very close. We're very tight. Anyway, so he's mellowed.
Oh, good. You know, it used to be
So
me, Bruce Smirnoff,
yeah, no,
Goldstein, and
yeah,
Reback. I mean,
and
that's who I
Reback.
hung out with. And Barry
Yeah,
Marner was my
that's
roommate.
right. I remember. So what happened was he and I got reputations as writers, and we got recommended to write an album for David Fry and to write stand up for Gabe Kaplan in his heyday. So within 1 year of starting stand up, we were writing for maybe one of the top comics in the country who created Welcome Back, Kotter. He flies us to Vegas. We're writing this album the whole time for David Fry, who lives east and west. He
Wow.
had like 3 homes and Miami, I believe. And but he's got a terrible reputation as an alcoholic. And uh, Gabe flies us from then Vegas, 2 weeks in Vegas. Then we flies us to LA to keep writing for him. We're writing this album for David Fry, who records the album out there, but can never get it sold because, I mean, it went well, but he could not get it sold because he has a terrible reputation. So Billy ends up staying in LA. I moved back to New York because I miss New York and stand up. And you know, that I my kind of comedy wonder years between, let's say, 77, 78 and 85, I got literally my act together. I won the big laugh off on Showtime, which launched me. Eddie Murphy was on that show, and the fact that I beat Eddie Murphy
Came in
he was
fourth.
just before he got Saturday Night Live.
Carol Leifer.
Carol Leifer was on there, Mark Schiff and Rick Overton. And I went on last, I killed, I won. It was hosted by, oh God, what's his name? Father Guido Sarducci.
Oh yeah, right. I have that on video, by the way. I have that on cassette video here, right here.
Yeah, but it launched me. I went from rarely working to, that was 1980, rarely working to headlining. I went from hardly working to headlining. I was making a living, but you know, there were not many gigs. And then starting in the early 80s, explosion of comedy clubs, explosion. So within 3 years, I got my literally act together. And then I was doing, many TV shows. You know, I didn't get on. Somewhere in the mid 80s was Star Search. But also, I mean, there were a lot of other shows. Merv was going. I couldn't get on Carson yet. And it was just a great trajectory for me. It wasn't too fast.
You were there at the right time, at the right place to hit the golden age of comedy.
Plus, it was like a renaissance of stand-up. Like you said, it was very fortunate for me. And I thank God for that. I mean, everything, all the ducks lined up. Literally having money coming in the first 9 months. I'm a starving artist. I have money coming in. Having those writing gigs with Kaplan in his heyday. Billy and I made a big mistake. Gabe liked us a lot. We could have said, hey, put us on the staff, but we didn't know, hey, can we write on a sitcom? You know, but he liked us, and they would have hired a team because you get like 2 for 1, basically, comedy. But you know, we would have gone from the second we started in stand up, like, you know, within the first year, we're writing for all these people. You know, a year later, I would have stayed in LA if I knew I could have. It never dawned on us. We look at each other going, how come we didn't ask him this? He was the star of the biggest sitcom for a few years on TV. And, you know, partially because, you know, of John Travolta. exploded. So yeah, it was really great. And then '85, I moved west.
Let me just ask you a quick question. Did you ever tell Robin about his influence on you with Good Morning Vietnam, the radio show?
Not quite, but I mean, I did. I talked to him a few times. He was very even the last time I saw him, he was reverential. Is that the right word? He'd be like, "Mr. Middleman, how are you? Nice to see you." It was very sweet. It was very sweet. But I never talked to him about that. Never talked to him about that. But I forget when Good Morning Vietnam, what year that was, but I would have been like one of those radio guys from the Army radio guys.
So believe it or not, we've gone through 27 minutes, and I think that they want me to stay with 30. I'd love to do another show with you in the last minute or so. Tell me about what you're doing now, and share with me a story that one of your favorite stories about getting up there in the world with comedy.
Oh God. What I'm doing now, mainly if anybody needs a clean comedian for a corporate event, a private party, I do like a 50th wedding anniversary, a 90th birthday, a holiday party for, I've done, hundreds of these kinds of shows, corporate events, an awards ceremony for, I'll do anything. I do auctions and hosting, and I do all that in the corporate sector and private parties. That's what I do. I travel the country doing that. I've done things worldwide.
How can people get in touch with you?
Well, if they want my phone number, they can have my phone number.
How about an email or an email maybe?
Yes, Steve Mittleman at AOL. Steve, MITTTT, Tom, LEMAN, Steve Mittleman at AOL.com. Go on YouTube. You can see 30 different tapes of me over the years. I really change an awful lot. Like the first thing I have is the big laugh off on Showtime. That's like the first thing that maybe shows up. Yeah, they can just get in touch with me that way. And in part two, I'll tell you some stories just blow your mind.
You know what? This was so much fun, and we really didn't even, get to the edge of the iceberg here. So
yeah, I know. We got so much. Yeah.
Let's do another show real soon, okay?
I hope so. And I'll give you a buzz soon, too.
Very good. Steve Mittleman, what a great time. Thanks you so much for
bye, everybody.
Sharing your life with us. And, what a beautiful show business story, a great experience.
Yeah. Whoa. Hello. Hi, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.